If you go down to the woods today, you better prepare a tall. Down in the caves the spiders play, and witches will take your soul. If you make it out, you can boast. It's Pebbles playing Panic Coaster.
Hello, I'm Mr. Pibbles, but you can call me Peter. And welcome back to our challenge. I always say that. No, welcome back to our Halloween Park series here in Planet Coaster 2. Now in the last episode we came in and we built this. And that's right, we made a start on this lovely little area of the park themed to the spooky woods. So, what we are doing today is based over here near this spinning ride here, Webbed. And, well, before we get started, let's turn on the lights quickly, as it were. And yeah, so obviously we've got this lovely spinning ride in here, and we're all themed up to spider webs. And I think we should just get on with the time lapse, so roll it.
Okay, I shall roll that time lapse. Hello, it's me here with the time lapse where we are getting on with this part of the park. Now, obviously, in our last episode, as I have probably already mentioned, we got our two first flat rides of this area in, and now we are getting our signature roller coaster of the area in, which is tied into the idea of this massive spider's web. Now, I will straight up right now give you an arachnophobia warning. If you are scared of spiders, then please do not watch this episode. It's not worth it. We do play around with spiders. Like, I won't be offended if you don't watch it. But there we go. Now, what sort of roller coaster are we putting in today? Now, you will see that I've put in the Raid, which is the in-game version of the Intamin Blitz. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, you've already done one of those in the last area of the park with Restraint, our technically a motorbike and cycle car coaster, but we put the Raid cars on it. But no, as you'll see here, we are making a spinning coaster, and I needed these. I needed this track type though, so that I could come in and put launches on it, because obviously everything takes place within this pit. But I didn't want to have that sort of slow, monotonous thing of ascending a lift hill just to get out of here and doing so halfway through the layout, because, you know, that's going to be slightly boring. But what we do here in kind of making it a launched coaster means we can do some interesting things. So actually we are skipping to halfway through the layout now to add the launch in here. And by adding this launch here, it just means that we can already come in and sort it all. Now, these launches are all that we are adding from the Raid as a coaster model. And again, like, I could add more interesting elements like a switch track and a spike and whatever, but I thought actually we've got that in Restraint, and then we've got our other roller coaster, Flock, which is also interesting in its own way, and I wanted to do something slightly different, which is why we've got this spinning coaster. And it is really interesting what we do here with the spinning coaster, because I've never really played around with these. You know, I've done a little bit of testing around to see what I can do, but I've never really got in and played with these, this model of coaster. So, you know, it's really fun to come in and give it a go. And I really like the layout that we've got going on. You know, I know that these are traditional sort of spinning coasters are very much known for kind of having tight turns, and having kind of all these bits that force the car to spin. And I think we do get a number of those throughout, which I can't complain too much about. And yeah, it just works. Now coming in here, just adding this little bit here, so we can connect these two bits up, and you'll notice that these don't connect up. I have no idea why, it's really annoying. So instead what we opt to do is going to be to copy this layout with what we've already got. Because, you know, it's really annoying that I couldn't connect it up, because I got this part of the layout worked out perfectly, and it just didn't want to work. So instead, here I am. I'm not going to say meticulously tracing it, because it's not one-to-one, but roughly tracing it so we get a similar layout and a similar sort of vibe to what we've already got. And obviously we could connect it up there to the end, but we are not done with this roller coaster yet, because there is one more trick after the launch that I want to get in, and you will see that in a sec. And I think it's really cool, and I think it is one of the finest elements of this coaster, which is quite fun. Now, getting rid of that sort of bit we had to trace there, obviously now we can connect this up to the launch. But first, we need the block section, just so, you know, we can make it through the layout with multiple trains. And you'll see it here come to there and then just launch into the wall. I promise it doesn't launch into the wall, we just don't have track there yet, because we're getting that in now. So the idea will be for this bit that it's sort of sunk into the wall, and you go through this cave that's secluded from the rest of it, so we could do something special in there. And surprise, surprise, that something special is spiders. And then it goes into this element here, which I absolutely love. You know, I wanted some sort of stalling element over this queue line, and I tested it out, and I came up with something like this that just looked really, really cool. And I think kind of that's my favourite element, because all of this takes place sort of sunken into the ground, and you know, you'd be able to see it looking over a fence or whatever, and looking down, you'd be able to see this in the ground. But I wanted there to be at least some part of this coaster that you could see from above, and I thought, what better than this element here, where you can just stand in the queue line for another roller coaster, for another ride, and you know, this thing that's spinning suddenly whips over your head, and it's really cool. I really like it. Now you can see me here just testing it out, making sure it works, and I am not thrilled by the speed that gets. It's just way too fast, and it looks slightly silly when it does work, but that's neither here nor there. Obviously I have a bit of a play around with that, and now we can finally go on to finishing off this layout, which is quite fun. Obviously it's more of these helixes, more of these bits that go up and down. I wanted this to feel like a tangled mess, for reasons that you will see once we get further into this video. I wanted it to feel like this tangled mess down kind of in this cave, and I think we definitely achieved that feel. And I think what we get, I am really proud of as a coaster, because people who have seen my channel before, you will know I have said it already, I am not a coaster builder, I am a themer. I am someone who likes to put scenery down and make it look pretty, but I don't necessarily like building these, and I'm not necessarily good at them. And it is that which makes me go, okay, let's have a play around and see what we can actually do. And I am actually really proud of how this turned out. I'm proud of all the coasters in this park, to be fair. They all do something different, and they all achieve a different purpose. And I think it is kind of figuring out what each one needs to achieve that leads to me going, okay, we can do something cool. So, like, for example, here, at the end, obviously we don't have any lift hills or whatever, so we can't just pull it up out of the web. So what we do is we launch it again just a little bit at the end to help it get up to the top again, and I think it looks really cool. So we get to there, and obviously we need to increase the speed or whatever, but you know, that doesn't matter. I still think it works for what it is, and it gets back to the station and it all looks cool. So, putting in a test now with all 3 sets of cars. You can see it playing around, and I wouldn't say there are any dueling elements per se, but when you look at it from above, there are some elements where it does sort of the same thing down in the pit on both sides, and it's really cool. And that is why I wanted it to look like a tangled mess, because obviously turning all of this white makes it feel very much like a spider's web, which was the vibe I was going for. And you can see me here carving out the inside of this cave, so we can have this almost dark ride show element while you're kind of getting out of this launch, which is quite fun. And here's the arachnophobia warning, because we're putting a spider in here, and a large one at that, because I thought it'd be really cool to have sort of the big spider hidden from view, and kind of getting these webs in and around this area is really cool, because it just means that, everything is tangled, everything has the sort of feel. And bearing in mind, I've got the flashlight on here. This is done without all of this light. There are a couple of lights in here to sort of light it up a little bit, but they're all red, they're all coloured, they all kind of don't give off too much light, and I think that's sort of the main thing about this, is that, this park's intended to be seen at night, so that's something that I'm like, okay, lighting is going to have to be a big thing for this park. But even during the day, I want that bit in there to be have this wow factor of, you go through this cave and then suddenly there's this massive spider that pops out of the darkness at you, and I think it's really cool. And I saw this one web and I thought, I have to try this, I have to see if it works. And that is this funnel, and I really wanted you to fly through this funnel at speed, and we ultimately do go for it, and it just looks kind of cool. And the biggest thing about this, kind of the theming for this, is it does just need to be a lot of webs, because what else would you have in a spidery pit than webs, So it's quite fun here. You can see me kind of placing down all of these different bits of webbing, just to make everything look and feel right for the ride itself. And there is the cut in our footage where everything down there is themed, and we can move on to the stations and the queues and the other sets of path. So starting with the exit this time, we are sort of coming down here and just placing it down there. I really wanted to have separate load and unload stations, just because I wanted to have that sort of feel to the ride. And I should probably tell you what we are going for theme-wise with these buildings. But before I do, you might notice that I've actually themed up the ride cars themselves. They are black. I've put some lights on the front and the back that look like spider eyes, and I've just put some little legs out the side, because I thought that'd be really cute and really funny if I did that. But yes, so the vibe we are going for these buildings is old abandoned sort of brick buildings in the woods. You can see images of them all across the internet, and you think of these in an American context. They're very much wood and log cabins, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and you don't really get those necessarily in the UK. So what I've gone for a lot more is sort of this brick building that sort of sits out in the woods away from everything. And you'll see by the end of the episode, I really like what we come out with. It looks really cool. So it's sort of playing up with this rough brick from the fairy tale pack, and then just kind of building these interesting building shapes, just so we can make something that looks a little bit more interesting than a box. And then coming in here and sticking these down so we can get a bit of a roof on the building is all fun stuff. And I did want to toy around with getting sort of a curved tower on this, and so we go for this back corner here. and ultimately I really like the way that it looks. It just adds something slightly mystical and slightly spooky to this area and to this queue line, which again is what it needs, really. Kind of going for these dark red roofs. Ultimately, we end up ditching the castle spires because they're just too tall. I wish we had more curved roofs like that. You know, ones where they've got the overhang and they look kind of nice. But ultimately, these keep roofs are the ones that we go for the buildings themselves, because they just have that sort of slightly tired shingled look, which is quite fun. And you can see there that the base of something is taking shape that sort of, again, just fits the vibe of this area. And coming in and putting these pillars in is just perfect for kind of everything like this. Now again, did I have any influences when building this this ride and this building? Not really, to be fair. You know, the only two spinning coasters that I've been on are Crush's coaster over at Disneyland Paris and Spinball Whizzer at Alton Towers, and neither of them have a particularly big influence here. And I can't really say that it's inspired by Ride to Happiness, because I've never been on it. I don't know what it does. So all I know is it spins, but it's not this type of spin. It's an extreme spinner by Mack, and that is in the ride, but that is in the game, but I don't have the ride type. So I think kind of the ride itself has this very much vibe of something new and interesting. I did try building something like this in Planet Coaster 1 for my big final park project, where it had sort of this spooky vibe, and kind of it was meant to be the Spider's Pit, but it didn't turn out nearly as well as this, and it was also a spinning coaster, which is fun. But in terms of the stylistic kind of station and influences behind that, I would definitely say that the Dark Forest at Alton Towers is definitely sort of the biggest influence behind this. That and the Cursor Alton Manor, because they've both got this slightly tired, slightly broken feel to them, and I really, really wanted to exemplify that kind of within this specific ride and this specific area. Now, coming down to the queue line, we very much go for a not cattle-penned queue line. I know we have some cattle pens just as we go into the station, but I really wanted this to feel like it was a natural flowing path, and that you didn't quite know where it was going, which was quite... And I think that is perfectly kind of exemplified in the way that the path turns out itself. And now you can see me here just trying my best to name this coaster. Now I was trying to come up with some sort of name, and we end up with Enter the Nest, because obviously you're dipping down into this caves system and this hole in the ground. But first and foremost, it is a spider's nest that you are sort of flying down into and invading, if you will. And I thought actually it would make a really cool name, because a lot of the names of the rides in this park are, you know, one word, and kind of bring out the terror, if you will, by using one word. Things like flock, flock, restraint, electroshock, all of that. So I wanted something a little bit more long and a little bit more kind of drawn out, which is why here we have gone for Enter the Nest, which is a slightly goofy name for what it is, but I think it works given the sort of tone and vibe of the rest of this area. And coming in and putting in the same sort of roof on top of here, again, you can just see slowly how this is coming together, and there is definitely the start of something here with sort of these buildings and the way that they look around everything. And just getting some scenery around that will make it really, really pop. But I don't need to tell you that because I'll show you a little bit later. Now coming in here, again, we are kind of adding these pillars in, doing what they do best on the corners, and just, as I say, adding that frame that is so sorely needed for this coaster. For the station of this coaster. I like a good frame on my buildings. It just kind of makes it ties everything together and makes it look a little bit less like it's just a block of a square of brick or whatever. It kind of adds that texture to the outside that it needs, and then just adding these windows onto the side again just adds so much. And I thought this time I'd get the windows in before I add the greenery, but coming into here and adding the ivy up in the corners and across the whole ride as, well, a whole, it just does, again, add to the overall vibe of the ride and the atmosphere of the area. You know, you're walking in the queue and you look over and you just see this tired brick building that looks abandoned. You know, what are you going to think? And it just adds to the atmosphere and storytelling of this area. It's sort of, in a way, I've just thought of this, like the towers at Alton Towers. Now, I know this is a lot less kind of big and in your face as the towers, but this is also meant to be something that's sort of fallen into disrepair, that's been abandoned, not in the woods. I know that the towers aren't in the woods, but you know what I'm trying to say, in that kind of I wanted it to have this broken and beaten down vibe that, you know, the boarded up windows and smashed in bits and pieces of the towers have. And just getting them in here just looks so nice. And I really, kind of the thing I like about this the most is the fact that it's been reclaimed by nature. I think that just adds so much to, again, the overall story of the ride and of the area as a large. I think it just adds to that whole vibe, and indeed it adds to the idea of this being a woods-themed area, because how many horror movies take place in, say, a log cabin in the woods? And I know this isn't technically your traditional American-style log cabin, but I think it still stands as having that vibe of a cabin in the woods. You know, classic example of that is Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead, and then The Evil Dead 2. And then not the third movie, because that had a completely different tone and vibe, but there we go. And then other things that come to mind are obviously the movie Cabin in the Woods, which sort of spoofed this whole idea of having this cabin in the woods be a location for a horror movie. And then you've also got the things like the cabins in Friday the 13th, because obviously that all takes place at a camp, and just things like that. That is the sort of vibe we're going for, of this building in the woods that, you know, is secluded from everything else, and that is what is supposed to be here. Now coming in, taking our brush and sticking down all of these trees along here, just to, again, add to the vibe of the area by coming in and actually foresting this forest up. You know, this is supposed to be a woods, so by placing these here it looks good. And now I will see you in a sec in real time. Enjoy.
So, we've had a very productive day today creating this Enter the Nest, our lovely spider's web themed spinning coaster, along with its queue line and its station buildings. And if you have enjoyed this episode, then please feel free to give me a like, give me a comment, possibly even a subscribe if I'm lucky enough. And I will see you in the next episode. Ta-ta! Roll that outro.